a good life for me is a life that's lived in purpose, where I feel like my outward actions, my actions in the world, are a reflection of some inner alignment, some alignment with my inner reality, right? And however that manifests itself, for me, it's being a creative being. I'm very clear that that's my mission. I believe creativity is a calling, not much different from a religious calling, if you will, or a calling in any other facet of life. But certainly, I feel that alignment, that inner and outer alignment, is key for me to living a good life.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reflections on Living Well podcast, where we explore perspectives on the good life in the 21st century. I am your host, Broderick Rodell. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Reflections on Living Well podcast. Today, our guest is Masud Olufani. Masud is an Atlanta-based multidisciplinary artist born in Los Angeles, California, and raised in multiple cities, including New York, Miami, New Orleans, Dallas, and Atlanta. He is an assistant professor of art and visiting arts fellow at Morehouse College, and he also teaches at the United States Federal Prison in Atlanta, Georgia. Masud has exhibited his work nationally and internationally. He is a featured artist in the 2024 Dakar Biennale in Senegal. The artist has completed residencies at the Vermont Studio Center, the Hambidge Center for Arts and Sciences, and Tallier Portobello Norte in Panama. He is a 2018 Southern Arts Prize State Fellow and recipient of a 2015-16 MOCA GA Working Artist Project Grant. Masud enjoys traveling, exercise, reading, and long meandering conversations. What's up, Masud? How you doing, my brother?
What's going on, my man? How you feeling, brother?
I'm feeling real good. I'm
Good.
very, very excited to have this conversation. Listeners might hear like, oh, you always say you're excited to have this conversation, but I'm very excited to have this conversation in particular. I hope we do have a nice meandering conversation here about the good. I do like to have that as well, but
Mm-hmm.
also like to. And that bio was a very short summation of some of the things that you do and you've done. You are an artist. You're an actor. You do so much, and I think that my excitement for having you here on the podcast to have a conversation is related to such a stored background that you have. And I won't say much more. I think it'll kind of come out in our conversation, some of the aspects of your life experiences, and how they relate to your philosophy, your life, your view, your perspective on what a good life means. But before we jump into that, even though I read that biography, I still like guests to share a little bit about themselves and how they feel about themselves in this moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I am first and fundamentally is a spiritual being. So I begin there as like the grounding point, the realization that essence that makes me is the deepest part of myself. And then I have these other identities that are grafted onto that, right? Or that grow out of that. I'm a Black man. I am an artist, creator. I'm an educator. I'm a writer, and I'm an actor, and an aspiring, someone who aspires to live a life that has kind of service as at the root of what I do. So I think fundamentally that those are the ways, those are the monikers I would use to kind of frame my own personal view of who Masud is. Apart from that, I'm also a son of an 82-year-old father, a mother who passed away in 2007. I have two older brothers. I have a little brother and a little sister. I'm a proud uncle. I am a graduate of Morehouse College. So all of these things are ways of are part and parcel ways of describing me. But the foundational element of who I am, the Rubicon, the kind of the grounding point is this spiritual reality that from which all these other things grow out of. So, and it's that aspect that I think for me allows me to move in spaces and feel a sense of kinship with everybody, no matter who's in the room, whether it's Black folk, white folk, Latino folk, Asian folk, because I know fundamentally at the end of the day, we're all spiritual beings. And it's that substance, right, that links us all, that connects us all, that binds our hearts and our souls. So, yeah, that's the Cliff Note version, brother. I don't want to dive too deep.
I think we'll naturally do that. I love it. I'm already pumped up. I was pumped up beforehand, and then just hearing that explication, I love it. I
Mm,
love that you start off that I'm a spiritual being, and I think that we all are grounded in that. We're all an expression of the divine. That's my
yes.
perspective, and
Hmm.
or the expression of spirit. And
Hmm.
I love how you start from there, and from there, all of these various branches sprout out of there
Hmm.
that speaks to your experience as a
Hmm.
human being in this life. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm really looking forward to unpacking a little bit more of that, some of your viewpoints that you kind of um, stuck in there in that introduction of yourself. And I think that's directly related to what living well means and what the
Mm,
good means.
yeah.
So I like to start from the beginning. I start here, and then we'll play around with the with what you say.
Hmm. Sure.
What is the good life? What does living well mean to you? And we'll go from there.
Wow, yeah, it's so interesting because, there's so many kind of iterations of what the good life means. In America, in the West, it's usually associated with the acquisition of material possessions, money, cars, big houses, those sorts of things, living a life of leisure. Um, And while, a small little sampling of that is not necessarily a bad thing, it's not my motivator in life. A good life for me is a life that's lived in purpose, where I feel like my outward actions, my actions in the world, are a reflection of some inner alignment, some alignment with my inner reality, right? And however that manifests itself, for me, it's being a creative being. I'm very clear that that's my mission. I believe creativity is a calling, not much different from a religious calling, if you will, or a calling in any other facet of life. But certainly, I feel that alignment, that inner and outer alignment, is key for me to living a good life. Then it's feeling like you have a life of impact. Is it a life that bleeds out from just the self and bleeds out into the world and has impact in the surrounding circles and your community and your family? That's very important to me. My engagement with teaching in the prison system is an example of that. That's one way that I feel like I'm having impact, right? But then also not necessarily just in that kind of formal setting, right? That kind of institutional setting, but coming in contact with young people, with anybody I come in contact with. It's how does my interaction with this person hopefully make the road that they're traveling, the life that they're living, the load that they're carrying, perhaps a little bit lighter. And I think that so much of that is about encouragement. It's about upliftment. It's about seeing the potentialities, the capacity in other human beings, seeing them also in myself, being aware of that, right?
Hmm.
And that kind of oscillating energy between this kind of being an internal witness to one's experience through life, and also being an external witness to other people's experience. Holding both of those realities, those truths within oneself, and so I find that for me, living a good life is so synonymous with this idea of community, service, and everything that I'm engaged in being a means to be of service to humanity as a whole, as a creative, as an educator, hopefully as an uplifter to other people. So to me, man, that's the good life, brother. When I can draw that last breath and feel like I have had an impact in a positive way on somebody's life, even if it's just one soul, then I know, as Dr. King said, my living will not be in vain. So
Mm.
that's the good life to me, brother.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah,
So beautiful.
yeah,
Yes. And and that speaks to how you describe yourself, starting off as a spiritual being and bringing in service, even as you describe yourself, and how that's so relevant to your view, your take on what a good life is or what living well means. I find it interesting that you brought up the way we typically see the good life in America. We both live here.
yeah.
I've lived in Atlanta. You're there in Atlanta now, and Atlanta is a great place, but boy, it's highly materialistic.
Oh yes.
Uh,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
and sometimes we all think as a culture, and we've been enculturated to
Mhm.
see or to think that material possessions, how much we can consume,
Yeah.
is a measurement of how well we're doing. I mean,
Mhm.
we're encouraged to think that way through economics, GDP.
Mhm.
How much are people buying and selling stuff?
Mhm.
How much of the human interaction is measured in terms of the exchange of goods and services?
Yeah.
But you say that the good life for you is like, no, 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 no. For me, the good life is about community. It's
Mhm.
about serving others.
Mhm.
It's about a life well lived is caring for another human being.
Mhm.
I would assume that there's some empathy and compassion in there.
Mhm.
But when you're working in a prison, you're being with another human being and trying to uplift them in some capacity.
Yeah.
And I love that you're at the end of the day for you, the good life is about service. It's
Mhm.
about doing the good in the world,
Mhm. Mhm.
uplifting a person's life,
Mhm.
being a vehicle
Mhm.
for the upliftment of humanity. And I
Mhm.
would argue that that points to your view of seeing yourself as an expression of spirit. And if you see yourself as an expression of spirit and all beings an expression of spirit, it only makes sense to serve
Yes.
and to connect with others. I love it, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking of mm, I think my inclination, my desire to be intentional about uplifting and encouraging others is because I know what it did for my own life,
Mm-hmm.
and to keep people
Mm-hmm.
along the way in my path when I could have gone another way. Perhaps when I was feeling dejected and down, maybe there was something going on at home. Maybe I had an incident dealing with racism or whatever it was. But a key person coming in just at the right moment and saying something that makes me think of myself in a different way, makes me consider broader possibilities for my life. And even though at the time I may not have fully believed it, because I know a few times I was like, who are you talking to? My name's Masud. Are you sure you got the right guy? But it was an echo. It was an echo in my mind. And it was just enough of an echo to get me to think about other possibilities for my life.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I'm interacting with students, when I'm in the prison system, whether they be incarcerated brothers or whether they be, unincarcerated, brothers or sisters on the outside, or just a young person I come in contact with, I'm always looking for that. I'm always trying to find that spark of inspiration, right? That I can tap into, that I can ignite in that individual.
Mm.
You know, I've been a Baha'i now since 1992, and one of the teachings in the Baha'i faith is this the importance of encouragement. That somebody asked Abdul Baha, who was the head of the faith in the late 1800s, early 1900s. They said, "What's the essence of the Baha'i faith?" And he thought for a moment, and he said, "Encouragement."
Hmm.
Encouragement. And there's a number of beautiful teachings that say things like, do you regard yourself as a gnat when within you the universe is folded?
Hmm.
Noble I made thee. You know, man is a mine, is a mine full of gems of inestimable value. It's the
Mhm.
lack of a proper education that does not allow us to mine those gems. So, how can I
Mhm.
be intentional, right, in my interactions with other human beings in the way that I speak to myself, right? Because I can't give someone what I also have not manifested within myself. So, how am I, first of all, bringing myself to account each morning when I get up in the evening time, thinking about my life? How do I want to enter the day? Acknowledging the things that I think I'm doing well at, and then, acknowledging that I have some other things that I need to work on, right? So there's that duality within the human spirit, right? The fact that we
Mhm.
never fully arrive. We are always in the process of arriving, right?
Mhm.
And having done that internal work with myself, then going out into the world and saying, and being intentional about my interactions and seeing ways that I can have impact on other people's lives, that I can get them to think of new possibilities, perhaps. And I'm speaking particular of people who are struggling with that, right?
Mhm.
So that's the work, man. That's the work of being part of the human family, brother. That's the work,
Mhm.
man. I mean, why else are we here other than to love deeply, intentionally, to see the beauty in ourselves and in others, and to recognize the diversity of the human family and to celebrate in that, to dance with joy and ecstasy in that diversity, the beauty of that
Mhm.
diversity. Man, why else
Mhm.
are we here, brother?
Exactly. I'm with you, brother. I'm so with you, man. I
Yeah,
told you,
man.
you get me all pumped up over here. Yeah, you said several things there I want to draw out that I think is really critical and important because it happened for me as well. Is
Yeah,
a lot of times motivating factor or the importance, the value of service
yeah,
because having someone in your life
yeah.
and that can help you and see something in you and encourage you
Hmm.
to to move forward in your life,
Yeah,
encourage you to draw out the light that's in you, that sees the light in you, and want to help and support you in that process. No, I
yeah.
wouldn't be here doing this podcast if someone wouldn't have pulled me to the side and say, "Young man, you can do better.
Yes,
Young man, you got something in you. Young
yes,
man, you should go off to school. You know
yes,
what? I'm going to help you. I'm going to
yes,
help you go off
yes.
to school because I'm one of those kids that were, I wasn't a bad kid, but I'm a
Mhm.
small country kid, small rural town, didn't know much,
Yeah.
never been on a college campus.
Mhm.
I thought about it. Yeah, like I'll play football and go to
Mhm.
college, but it wasn't, how serious was I about it? I don't really know, but I
Yeah.
had teachers. I was like, no, 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 you got a
Mhm.
gift. We're going to
Mhm.
help you. We're going to find you scholarships. We're going to help you fill out your application. We're going to help you fill out your financial aid application, all of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably one of the reasons why, I don't think it's the only reason, but one of the reasons why I am so dedicated to service
Mhm.
and education and wanting to help others, because I'm
Mhm.
like, man, I'm here. This understanding that I have right now is because of others
Yeah.
who saw something in me and
Mhm.
tried to help me do something with my life.
Mhm.
And I think that that's an important piece of the puzzle, is to have people in our lives that encourage us.
Mhm.
To live a good life, to live well, we
Mhm.
can't do it alone.
Mhm.
I think we have to have, or it behooves us to have individuals in our lives
Mhm.
to pull us to the side or to point things out for us, to
Mhm.
encourage us, like you're saying. It's such a big piece of the puzzle.
Mhm.
I want to come back to that, but I want to say draw a few of the other things that you mentioned
Mhm.
too, is love,
Mhm.
how central love is to the good life,
Yeah.
mindfulness,
Yeah.
being aware and sensitive to how you're seeing, how
Yeah.
you're behaving, your
Yeah.
own experience. And then from that, having some capacity to process and understand your experience and analyze your experience. And then from there, how do I take that
Mhm.
from that mindfulness of my own experience, the exploration of that experience, and then translate that into how I behave and interact with others in the world, which requires more mindfulness, more cognitive capacity. So all these things are an important piece of the puzzle, as well as some form of teaching, some
Yeah.
form of knowledge or principles or wisdom, tradition, be it a religious tradition or not, a philosophical
Hmm.
tradition.
Hmm.
Is there something
Hmm.
that can some guiding principles out there, some
Hmm.
pieces of literature or individuals that can shine the light of
Hmm.
a much more expansive
Hmm.
um, a view
Hmm.
of oneself and I would say
Hmm.
expansive and inspirational view of oneself and the world. All
Hmm.
those different things are pieces of the
Yeah.
puzzle to
Yeah.
what a good life is.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
if you don't mind, can you say a little bit more about, well, you can say something to that, please, by all means. And also, can you say a little bit more about how did you get here? How did
Hmm.
you get to see the world this way? I know you mentioned a little bit of it, but can
Hmm.
you tell us a little bit more of that history of your
Yeah.
story? Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah. I think, I am someone who believes the importance of telling one's story, bearing witness to one's story, and speaking the truth unapologetically. I came from an abusive background in my family, right? And parents who I think in many ways hadn't fully been mothered themselves, hadn't been fully, hadn't been nurtured enough themselves to know what to offer in
Mm-hmm.
some very key ways. Um, as a result of that, there was some very painful situations, some experiences that I had. Now it's interesting because on the other side of that equation, right? The pain that you go through, particularly when you're small and you don't understand the complexity of the world and the lives that your parents have lived and their three dimensionality, and that they're human beings too, and they have had their own struggles, whether they've been resolved or not resolved, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, on the other side, what if one is if one can sense it, if you can grow to understand the other side of it, what's waiting on the other side, if you can see it and tap into it, is the gift of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, empathy is different than sympathy. Sympathy is, I feel bad for you. It's feeling bad for someone. Empathy is a capacity to feel with someone, right? It's a much, much more deeper, connection and interaction with another soul, right? And it seems to me that empathy is at the core of really truly building authentic community.
Mm-hmm.
Because in order for me to engage in the co-creation of a loving, regenerative community, I have to be willing to bear witness to your story.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way I'm able to do that in an authentic way, if I bring empathy to the table.
Mm-hmm.
I may not understand, but I want to know. Can you tell me a story? It's the same thing you're doing here in your interviews, right? You're listening empathetically.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's not surface. It's not an affectation. It's not performative. It is being a deep witness, right, to the human experience. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So coming out of that experience and over time seeing how I had been deeply affected, but the gift was that I could tell when other children were going through things in their lives without them saying a word, because I knew the architecture of that behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I knew what it looked like. I knew what it felt like. Still to this day, I can look at a young person, everybody else in the room, or many people in the room might say, "That's a problem child." I said, "No, I think there's some problems at home.
Yep.
It's not the child." you know. So so that gift came out of that. And then as I began to get older and I began to, when I got to college, I got to Morehouse. I was living with a girlfriend at the time who was my high school sweetheart. We moved in together in Atlanta. Relationship broke up, and all of my life up to that point, I had really been relying on relationships. I've been looking for solid relationships because my home life relationships were so fractured and broken, right? So what became important to me was to build enduring relationships. So when those relationships did not pan out the way that I wanted, I was left bereft. That's how I felt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's only when, in so many ways, it's when we embark on our great journeys when we are bereft, when we're stripped of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to find a deeper meaning. So it was at that moment that I began to go on this diligent search, and it was an internal, a spiritual search. And I began to meditate and pray. I changed the way that I was living. I began to read a number of books. Khalil Gibran's The Prophet was deeply influential for me. I read the Tao Te Ching, another deeply influential book for me. I was reading the Quran. I was reading the Bhagavad Gita. I was reading the Buddhist text. And then eventually I came in contact with the Baha'i teaching. So I was going through this search, right, to try and find something that was solid, that wouldn't be a victim to the capriciousness of life, right? To the mood swings of individuals, to
Mm-hmm.
circumstances and conditions within society, something that was rock solid. That's what I was looking
Mm-hmm.
for. And so it was through that search, right, that thirst that I began to erect an architecture, a foundational architecture of truth on things that I recognized that were true for me, right? The fact that I am a spiritual being, that I'm connected to every living thing on the planet, not just human
Mm-hmm.
beings, but every other living thing on the planet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I began to unpack the false doctrine of racism, sexism, materialism, all these isms, right, which undermine the spirit,
Yeah.
you know? And so that journey was really fomented, was really catalyzed by pain, by difficult experience, by heartache, by grief, right? Until I was left in this field and had absolutely nothing. And I had to find something for me that would endure in perpetuity, something that I can hang my hat on every single day and say, I don't know what else is going on out here, but I know this for me is true.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of that internal architecture, the things that we've been speaking up to this point, that's how that journey kind of began and how it started. I became a Baha'i in 1992. While I was at Morehouse College, and I've been a Baha'i ever since. And you know, it's this constant. The journey never stops. It never ends. It's like this university that you enter and you never graduate from. We're constantly taking classes, revising the map, right? Looking at this thing, right? Trying to figure it out. You know, I thought this yesterday, but now after deeper reflection and some experience, I actually have to revise my map because I
Mm-hmm.
realized that actually was not. I didn't have the full story. Now I got a little bit more piece of the puzzle. Okay, I'm seeing a broader picture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so for me, that was the generation of that, and because that journey was internal, it had an impact on that internal transformation had an impact, of course, on everything external, right? So how I saw the world, how I thought about my relationships, how I thought about my work, my life's work going forward, right? What I wanted my life to be. So that really was the genesis of where that journey began, and it was hard and difficult and painful, but that's the work.
Yeah.
That's that's the work, brother. I mean, I don't know
Mm-hmm.
of anybody that entered a sociology 101 course and they never had no sociology before and had to read that book, had to take them tests, and would describe that as being easy. It's not easy. It's
No.
not easy. But it also is the most rewarding work I think the human the human being can embark on because it's a journey to the authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the source material. The seed of all connection begins with the authentic self.
Yeah, brother.
So, yeah.
Beautiful. Oh, love it.
Yeah.
I think, I love to ask folks that story
Mm,
because their story.
yeah.
Because in a story, you see the teaching.
Yeah. Yeah.
The teaching, in life, there's suffering, there's challenges,
Mm,
discomfort, pain.
mhm.
Those who listen to this podcast hear me say this often.
Yeah.
And you just heard it again in
Mhm.
Masud's story, in your story, that a lot of times that pain, that suffering is fertilizer
Yeah. Mm,
for transformation.
mm, mm.
And we don't have to be, this is another lesson in this. You don't have to create your suffering for yourself. That now a goal and
Mhm.
whatever teachings, and you've spoken a lot of things that has a major influence on me as well. All those texts that you mentioned, the same texts that I've
Yes.
explored as well.
Yes.
And so you don't have to. And those teachings are like, you can minimize unnecessary suffering.
Hmm. Hmm.
So again, the take home message: don't go out and create suffering for
No.
yourself unnecessarily. Don't
Mm-mm.
worry, it's going to be there.
Yes,
Just
absolutely.
don't worry about that.
Mm, absolutely.
Discomfort, pain, hard times is just a part of part of the human experience.
Absolutely.
It's what you do with it
Hmm. Hmm.
and how you were able to say, okay, things are hard. It's
Hmm.
hard,
Hmm.
and I think a lesson, even when it's hard,
Hmm.
we don't have to succumb to it.
Yeah.
That's a big lesson.
Yeah.
Just because my environment is conducive for one way of being,
Hmm.
it doesn't mean that I have to go down that path.
Yeah. Yeah.
Both of us, we're brothers. We're African Americans,
Hmm.
and in our community, for
Hmm.
historical reasons. I mean,
Hmm.
all communities have this, but in particular in our community,
Yeah.
sometimes we're ashamed to talk about.
Yes.
But in
Yes.
our community, we have a lot of pain and suffering that
Hmm.
we haven't healed from. And I
Yes.
think we need to be honest about that.
Hmm.
But just because we've had that pain and suffering and it perpetuates itself in our community, it doesn't have to
Hmm.
perpetuate itself.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
There are ways to transcend it,
Yes.
to work to overcome it.
Hmm.
But you said something that's important.
Hmm.
That process in and of itself is difficult.
Hmm.
Folks, it's hard. No one is saying that it's easy.
Yeah.
This is one thing that bothers me when people are like, oh, I have the magic solution that's going to just free up all your suffering. It's going to go away magically. That's bullshit,
Yeah,
people.
it is. It
Any
is.
guru, anybody out there saying that, that's just bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah.
The truth of the matter is that it's a painful process to come out of pain.
Yeah.
It is a painful process because of the way the mind works, the way
Hmm.
we operate.
Hmm.
We adapt to
Hmm.
those conditions,
Hmm. Hmm.
even if they're unhealthy conditions.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Our psychology going to adapt to it.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
what's going on in a lot of our communities. An
Hmm.
adaptation to hard times or hard, painful situations. And a lot of times that adaptation is to continue or perpetuate that pain
Yeah.
towards ourselves and the rest of the world. That's
Yes.
what we're seeing.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
you are a testament that it doesn't have to be that way.
Hmm.
There is a way out of
Hmm.
suffering.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
Buddhist teachings talk
Hmm.
about it. All the
Yeah.
traditions talk about it in their own particular way. There
Yes.
is a way out
Hmm.
of that suffering.
Hmm.
But you said something I think that's important throughout the whole painful process of transformation.
Hmm.
We have to be open.
Yeah. Hmm.
We have to be willing to let go of the patterns or the habits of mind that we have adapted.
Yes.
We have to be open to transforming those. Something, some way, somehow has to plant that seed that like, it doesn't have to be that way. And
Yes.
maybe it's a person like you,
Hmm.
person like me,
Hmm.
who've gone through it,
Hmm.
or a person who like you working in the prison system, you're talking to a young person or beyond or prior to the prison system, you're
Hmm.
talking to a young person, hey, it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know it's painful and I'm not gonna lie to you. It'll be
Mhm.
hard to change. Even
Yeah.
though the situation you find yourself in is painful, you don't necessarily like it
Yeah.
because of the nature of how you work as a human being.
Hmm.
You are
Hmm.
adapting.
Yeah.
Beneath the surface of your awareness, your programming is
Hmm.
happening because of the environment that you find yourself in.
Yeah.
Now you have to go and try to reprogram yourself.
Hmm. Hmm.
All that studying, picking out
Hmm.
all that literature,
Hmm.
checking out all that stuff is a process of gaining some knowledge, some insight. And
Hmm.
from that knowledge, how do you apply that knowledge to your reprogramming?
Yes.
And that is a very painful process
Yes, it is.
because
Hmm.
that programming is what you consider yourself. You
Hmm.
have to transform yourself.
Hmm.
And in the process of transforming yourself, the way that the mind works for evolutionary reasons, it
Hmm.
ain't gonna let go easy.
No.
Just because it's bad don't mean
Mhm.
it's not healthy for you, and it's doesn't mean your mind is gonna let it go just because you
Yes.
want it to.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
want to be clear about that, and I think you're being clear about that.
Hmm.
Is that just because you want to change yourself or habits of mind that are negative, that are not positive or conducive
Hmm.
to your well-being, yeah, great. That's
Hmm.
the start. You got to want it.
Yeah.
But ladies and gentlemen,
Hmm.
it's not going to be easy.
No.
And therefore you need support.
Yes.
You
Yes.
need some kind of support
Hmm.
system, a network. You
Hmm.
need to have an open mind.
Hmm.
You need to be open to continually growing
Hmm.
and opening yourself up to greater and greater possibilities, as you
Hmm.
just mentioned.
Hmm.
All of that is a part of the process. And you know what, folks? That is the good life.
Yes.
The good
Yes.
life is a part of is transformation. It's,
Hmm.
the transformational process
Yes.
is a part of the good life. It's not just feeling good.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's evolving yourself. It's developing these capacities that you're speaking of
Yeah. Yeah.
to transform
Mm.
yourself such that you can illuminate the divine or illuminate that light that's in you into
Yes.
the world. So no, I mean, I got in, I don't know, I just fed
No,
off
that's
of what you were
beautiful,
saying,
man.
and
That's so beautiful, brother. And I think at the heart of what you're saying, I think to take it to to a metaphorical plane, I'm thinking of I'm thinking of the human being made up of three primary parts of themselves, of oneself. What that's spiritual, mental, and physical, right?
mm-hmm,
And I'm thinking about those three parts as being muscles.
mm-hmm,
Now, we live in a society that's very materialistic. People love to go to the gym. They love to work out. They like to look cute on the beach. They want to look good in their suit or their dress when they go out on dates and all of that. That's an easy sell because
mm-hmm,
everybody wants to be fit and in shape, right? But what we'll often find is that one or two of those muscles will be strong, and one or two of those other muscles will be weak. And the same with the same intentionality that we approach the building of the body, right, or the look of oneself, how we adorn ourselves, is the same intentionality that we need to give to the mind and to the spirit. So I'm constantly thinking about that. It's okay. I'm taking care of my body. I'm trying to eat the right things. That's good. What have I done to keep my mind sharp, right? What are the practices that I'm doing to keep my mind sharp? How am I feeding my spirit, right? So it's that work. It never gets. I don't know of anybody. I mean, that has fun at the gym all the time.
no,
I go to the gym sometimes. I'm like, man, that was a good workout. And then some days I go, and they see me when I'm coming. Masud, you all right? It was rough today. You know what I'm saying? Today was a rough one. You know what I'm saying? So, but I come back.
mm-hmm,
I leave and I come back and I pick up again the next day or the day after that, right? And I think that's what I've learned in my journey is that it's just the commitment, the consistency,
mm,
showing up and being present, doing the work,
mm-hmm,
realizing that it's never going to be perfect, and I say that in quotes, right? Because I think
mm-hmm.
that's about ego anyway, right?
Yeah,
I mean, but one can strive for excellence in how one chooses to live one's life, recognizing that you will fail. There will be moments that you will fail. But
mm-hmm.
excellence is about getting up and trying again.
Yes,
It's about strengthening those muscles, right? Can I be more empathetic today? Can I be kinder to myself today than I was yesterday?
mm,
Can I be more forgiving of someone today? Can I be more patient? Can I have courage today?
mm-hmm,
You know, and so that for me and everything that you just said so beautifully, that's how that landed for me. That you triggered that thought in me about those muscles, building and strengthening those muscles. Yeah.
Oh man,
Mm,
yeah, that's beautiful, man.
mm,
Yeah, we have to keep exercising. We have to
man.
keep. Yeah, and there are going to be days. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up too. Yes, not only is it a hard journey, but you said something that's important. Even though the journey is challenging,
Mm-hmm.
there are moments where it feels great. Because think
Yes.
about it. When you go to a good example of this is building muscle mass.
Yes. Yes.
In order for you to build muscle mass, you have to tear the muscle. You
You
break
got
the
to.
muscle
You
down.
got to, brother. You
And
got to.
exactly, and that's a painful process,
It
right?
is. Yes. Yes.
Now, in the process of doing this, sometimes you go to the gym, you feel great about tearing your muscles,
Yes.
and they have to go through a recovery process. And sometimes you go to the gym, you know, I mean, feeling it. You know, I
Mm-mm.
really ain't feeling this
Yeah,
today.
yeah, yeah, for real.
So not only is it's just beautiful thing that happens about being a human being, is
Yes.
that not only is life challenging underneath
Mm-hmm.
the surface,
Mm-hmm.
we can find joy in the challenge.
Yes.
And it's challenging to transform yourself, just like building muscle.
Mm-hmm.
You have to challenge that muscle to
Yes.
break those muscle cells.
Yes.
And then they take, and once you break those muscle cells, give it some recovery period, those
Mm-hmm.
muscle cells come back stronger. And that's
Yes.
what a larger muscle is.
Yes.
But that process, now you have that larger muscle, you can handle more. You can
Yes.
handle a greater load. But
Mm-hmm.
it took, like you said, the practice, the exercise
Mm-hmm.
to build the muscle such that you can handle a larger load. But
Yeah.
in the process of that muscle building, getting larger to handle a larger load,
Mm.
it was a painful process to go through.
Yes.
So that's one piece of it.
Yes.
And in the process of breaking that muscle by exercising,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes exercising is fun.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, wow.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're like, I really don't want to do this today. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to do it. I don't feel like it.
Yeah.
Your mind to come up with every excuse. That's
Yeah.
kind of a psychologically painful process to go through.
Mm-hmm.
But we still have to be there.
Mm-hmm.
That we know that we have to be consistent.
Yeah.
We have to be consistent, and we can use that metaphor to, like you're saying, for spiritual development,
Yeah.
for psychological development,
Mm-hmm.
and just a metaphor for life.
Yeah.
There are ups and downs in life. I
Mm-hmm.
look at life like a a
Yes.
spiral that expands, and each that expands upwards like a tornado,
Mm-hmm.
that shape
Mm-hmm.
of a tornado. And
Mm-hmm.
at each line that's spanning, there's a wave function. There's
Yes.
ups and
Yes.
downs.
Yes.
There's
Yes.
ups and downs, folks.
Yes.
And it's a challenging process,
Mm-hmm.
but it's worth it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Don't allow it to discourage you. You
Yeah.
don't have to be afraid of it.
Yeah.
It's just kind of the nature of things.
Yeah.
And we're
Yeah.
saying this, we're not saying this to be like, oh yeah, might as well just go ahead and just
Mm-hmm.
engage in aberrant behavior because life sucks anyway.
Mm-hmm.
No, we're definitely not saying that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we're not saying that, oh, it's just life is just all easy, it's all pie, it's all cake and pie, it's great. No, we're not saying that either. And sometimes I think people get frustrated.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm emphasizing this is because in this conversation is because I don't want to lie to you.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
we want to be honest
Mm-hmm.
about how life works. We're only using metaphors. We're not saying we're 100% correct here. We're using metaphors to
Yeah.
talk about all this.
Yeah.
But the thing that you came to, even with all of that,
Mm-hmm.
you brought up these virtues,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
kindness. You
Mm-hmm.
ask yourself that
Mm-hmm.
growth process: am I getting kinder?
Yes.
Am I more empathic? So
Yes.
you have cognitive empathy, which is
Yes.
great.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do that. And
Mm-hmm.
you have that, I guess you can call it somatic
Yeah.
empathy
Yeah.
or feeling emotional empathy. Now,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I get a bad rep these days in certain circles because you can so-called overly do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you can overly do that
Mm-hmm.
when you don't have any, and when it's not done in a proper context.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You don't just do cognitive empathy. You need to do that other aspect of
Yes.
empathy too, to be able to feel into what another person is doing. But you need to have stronger boundaries, a
Mm-hmm.
container for yourself so that you can do that.
Yes.
And you talked about kindness. I say kindness.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about a couple other virtues that I just slipped my mind. I was about to say and just slipped my mind, going to
Courage.
empathy.
Courage is one of them.
Courage, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for
All
sure.
of these different things that you
Yeah.
can grow and nurture
Mhm.
and support. Can you say a little bit more about those virtues or some of the virtues you think that are important piece to
Well, it's
this?
interesting because I think if we look at the traditional notion of what's the archetypal vision of what God is, what has been taught to us via the apparatus of our religious institutions, and I'm speaking primarily about the church here, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That vision is someone sitting on a throne with a staff, casting judgment, and all of that. Now, if we look at religious history, we know that that the Quran, when Muhammad came in the Quran, the Islam outlawed images of God. So that what they are noticing is that in religious evolution, there's always this correction of things that have happened previously. So this over reliance, particularly in the art, the images of the Catholic Church, of the Christian Church, of these primarily white deities, right, sitting on thrones, that created a visual architecture, right? That created a visual kind of imaging. And then the Quran comes and says no. And what the Quran says is that we're not doing these images no more. There are 99 names of God: the beneficent, the merciful, the just, the forgiving, the all knowing, the all wise. So there is a distillation that takes place, right? Moving away from the archetypal images that have existed in visual culture to qualities,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what happens is there's a shift saying that we are going to move away from the pictorial reproduction of oftentimes marginalizing images, images that reinforce a kind of colonial power, right? And we're going to talk about the substance of the creator, of that spirit, their
Mm-hmm.
qualities, their virtues. That's how you get close to that source. It's the virtues, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, so the virtues in the Baha'i faith, the virtues are the purpose of life, the acquisition of the virtues of God. That's how we come to know and recognize that primordial essence, that substance, whether you want to call that God, energy source, the magnet, the supreme magnet, the cool dude on the hill, whatever you want to call that. We're talking about the same thing, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so how do I come to know or get closer to that source? It's first of all the recognition of what those qualities and those virtues are, understanding that those virtues in their purest sense emanate from that primal source. That's where they come from.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that I acquire those virtues, the closer that I get to the source.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about anybody else, but when I want to go home and kick my feet up and read a book, I want to go home. There's no other place like home. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I can go to my homeboy Benny's house and chill, but Benny's couch ain't just like mine. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
So I'm attracted to home. So we all have a common home in terms of that source. That source is one. All things emanate from that one source. Just like all rivers pour, they come from divergent places, but they start at one source and they pour in again to one source, right? So we're
Mm-hmm.
all constantly, our destiny, our purpose is to draw closer to that source,
Mm-hmm.
to be more fully ourselves, to be more fully human, to be more fully spiritual, more fully grounded,
Mm-hmm.
you know? To recognize that separation is the great illusion and delusion.
Mm-hmm.
That connection is the essence of life and creation.
Yeah.
So that's it, man. It's those qualities, those virtues: courage, love, compassion, empathy, creativity.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things are ways of approaching that source, getting closer to that source, to that essence, and that's where I want to be, brother, because that's the real party, brother. That's
Right.
that's where the groovy stuff is happening right there. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
That's where I want to be. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, man.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. I love it. I feel you on that. I think, we're the good, moving towards the good, and all these various positive qualities, these virtues, is moving closer to the source.
Yes.
Because that when you're engaged in kindness,
Yeah.
you're it's a there's an act of love that's involved in all of that.
Yeah.
You're recognizing the connection between you and
Mhm.
the other.
Yeah.
And then when you're in that moment of kindness, you and the other disappear, and then you get to taste God, you get to
Mm.
taste the divine, you get to taste
Yes.
that which is beyond our
Mm.
naming.
Yes.
And I think that that's what all these qualities do. Peace. When there's
Mhm.
peace, you can tap into the stillness of it all. You can,
Yeah.
it's like when in the Vedantic tradition, they talk about the waves on the ocean, and
Mm.
each one of us are like a wave on the ocean.
Mm.
And in moments of peace, it's like we dip into the oceanness of our being. It's
Yes.
like, oh, we tap into and we feel that,
Yes. Yes.
and all of these virtues, you can look at those metaphors, those words, and relate them to this divine quality, these
Mm.
divine natures, or this whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
spiritual natures, or I don't know if
Mhm.
you complete atheist, this nature of potentiality,
Mm.
pure potentiality,
Yes. Yes.
and we can tap into all of that. And
Yes.
I'm with you that these qualities that we call virtues,
Mm.
these are the attributes
Mhm.
that point us in that direction.
Mm.
And in the pain, the suffering, and a lot of I guess, the vices, or the unvirtuous characteristics,
Mhm.
are associated with separation,
Yes. Yes.
excessive distinction,
Yes. Yes.
excessive discord,
Yeah.
disconnection
Yes.
from the ground of our being. No
Yeah.
matter what word we use, no matter what tradition we're coming from,
Mhm. Mhm.
we're the goal of virtue, and to cultivate and to practice those virtues
Mm.
is to align ourselves and to move ourselves more and more towards that which I use the word divine,
Yes.
that which is divine.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I
Absolutely.
think that's beautiful. I think that's beautiful what you said. And I think that, you got various traditions that
Mhm.
have a laundry list of virtues. I think those virtues can be practically anything,
Mhm.
any
Mhm.
word you use, because the
Mhm.
word is not important.
Yes.
Anything that you do, any behavioral
Mhm.
qualities or attributes of one's behavior that is in alignment with love,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
connection,
Yes.
then
Yes.
those are virtues
Man.
that to
Yes.
cultivate. And if it's
Yes.
something outside of that moves you away from love,
Mhm.
those are vices. Those are
Yes.
things that are harming you. And for you, I can't say exactly what that is. There are
Mhm.
some universal things that we can
Mhm.
talk about:
Mhm.
courage, kindness, peace,
Yes.
love,
Mhm.
creativity. Well, I'm going to say a little bit more in a moment, a little bit more about creativity here. But
Mhm.
um, yeah, those things are going to, align us with that,
Yes.
with those things. And for me, for some other person who's listening to this, there may be some other terms that they use that, like, oh, actually, that's interesting. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Is it moving you more towards love? Is it
Mhm.
moving you towards source?
Mhm.
Is it
Mhm.
moving you much more towards connection? Okay,
Yes.
and I guess there's some virtue there. Those are some virtues there that I can learn from.
Mhm.
Some
Mhm.
values, some
Yeah.
principles that I can gain some insight from. So,
Yeah.
man, this is good stuff that you're saying, Masood. I love it.
Well, it certainly is not Masood. It certainly comes from a lifetime of reading and reflection. And you talked about community early, which I think is so important. It's so important to seek out points of connection, people that we can lean on when it's hard to go to the gym, right?
Right.
People that can give us that push and say, "Hey, man, no, you can do this," and that we can
Mm-hmm.
also be that for that person as well. Because the journey, as you
Mm-hmm.
said, the journey does get hard, and the only way to combat that sense of loneliness and isolation that I have found is through community, intentional community building with people that will help you to carry your load, and you also will help them to carry their load. That mutual bearing up under the weight of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that I know that I'm not alone. And this gets to this whole idea of vulnerability for me, which I call another virtue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of being transparent and vulnerable about our experiences and our journeys, right? Not being afraid or viewing, or we got to flip the script, man, because Men have had this thing wrong for generations. I mean, women are much more, they're much more able to talk about things like vulnerability, generally speaking, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
right? They don't view that as somehow defeminizing or weak, right? They
Mm-hmm.
actually, that's just a part of the way that they seem to be able to relate to each other. But for men, quite oftentimes, there's a challenge with that. We view vulnerability as somehow being weak. And I often say, it wasn't, I had done some work to get to the point where I could say this, but men are very good with outward shows of courage. We can
Mm-hmm.
take the field, we can take the baseball diamond, we can take the football field, we can jump in the ring, right? We feel
Mm-hmm.
very comfortable in that space. But when it comes to facing the lion within,
Mm-hmm.
that's where things get real iffy for us. And I would say that for men, our unfinished work, right, is to wrestle with that internal lion, right? To be honest about that internal lion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to flip the script and recognize that vulnerability is actually not a show of weakness, but an empowering show of strength,
Mm-hmm.
internal strength, which is always stronger than external strength.
Mm-hmm.
As Gandhi said when he was doing a protest in India, he was confronted by the British police who had colonized India, and they were asking him to leave this protest, and he said he would not. And one of his colleagues said, they'll kill you. And he said, well, if they do, they will have my dead body, not my obedience. So, so that's a brother. Now he's head and shoulders above us, but that's a brother that recognized the distance with that physical strength. That's a kind of strength. But I've tapped into something, brother, that's broader and deeper than that.
Right, right, right,
You know what I'm saying? So,
right. I
yeah,
love it.
man. Yeah, brother.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you brought in that vulnerability and
Yeah,
how
man.
important that is.
Mm.
Yes.
It's
And
so cleansing, man.
eh,
If we could just realize how cleansing that is, when you can lay that burden down, man, and just be like, and just be like. I remember I was having a conversation with a brother. This is a couple of years ago, and we were having an intimate moment, a real deep, intimate conversation about just what was going on in our lives, and something had happened. I think I had gotten some kind of accolade or award, and he said, "How do you feel right now?" And I could have said anything else, but instinctively, and I have learned to embrace what I feel is deep and true for me. I said, I feel insecure.
hmm,
And he said, wow, I never would have expected you to say that, Masud. I never think of you that way. But that moment allowed for an intimacy and a connection between us because he had felt that way. And there was an assumption because of the way that I presented in the world, perhaps, or spaces that he had seen me in, that was not part of my journey. Right.
hmm,
But we have to find the courage within ourselves um, to speak our internal reality. And I'm not saying that we go around just blabbing that or sharing that with everyone. A person has to earn the right to bear witness to our story, just as we
hmm,
have to earn the right to bear witness to their story. That's about trust, right?
hmm,
But when that right has been earned, to share it, to open your heart, to share not only what the joys and the beautiful things in your lives are, but what are the difficulties? What are you struggling with?
hmm.
You know, and that's about that in being co-creators of a kind of divine community.
Yeah.
You know, it
Hmm,
cannot be. We can't build something that is regenerative and is life affirming without that kind of vulnerability, without that kind of witness bearing, that kind of sharing. The house will not stand.
hmm.
We have to build it on solid ground. And those are the virtues that allow us to erect a sustainable structure on solid soil. You know?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Vulnerability. Mm.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's so
sweet,
beautiful.
sweet vulnerability, brother. Sweet vulnerability.
Right? Isn't it
Man.
interesting how
Yes.
liberating
Mm.
vulnerability is?
Oh,
It is
man.
so liberating.
Mm.
It's what
Mm.
you feel as an individual, you feel so much freedom when
Yes.
you allow yourself to be vulnerable, because I think it taps into what you mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
It allows you to tap into something that's a little more authentic, an
Yes.
authentic self. And
Yes.
the beautiful thing about that,
Mm-hmm.
as wonderful as it feels and as liberating as it is for
Mm-hmm.
you as an individual, for
Mm.
each of us, when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable,
Yes.
it is a necessary ingredient for connection to others,
Yes. Yes.
for
Yes.
relating to others. Because
Yes.
when two people, like you said, in a moment of intimacy,
Mm-hmm.
when you just let go
Yeah.
of all of that hardened shell and allow that vulnerability to be there, boy, you can connect in a much more deeper and a profound way. When
Yeah.
two people are meeting in their authenticity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I love this analogy that God or the divine is in between two people.
Mm.
When we let go of our little attachment to these
Yes.
characters or personas that we're playing and
Yes.
say, all right, man, I'm just going to be vulnerable. It's
Yes.
liberating for one. Just trust
Yes.
them. You got to trust me on that. It
Yes.
really is.
Yes. Yes.
Folks who listen, you got to trust us on that one. Just play
Mm-hmm.
with it. You'll see.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're doing that with other individuals and in a moment, and how profound that is and how much of
Mm-hmm.
a stronger connection that you can make with
Yes.
another person as a result of that,
Mm-hmm.
that is a foundation for. I'm so with you. That is a foundation for building loving community.
It's so profound what you're saying, because you got me, and I don't know why I'm on these metaphors tonight, but I'm an artist and a writer, so I think in
Love
metaphorical,
it.
allegorical terms. But something came to me as you were speaking and sharing that so beautifully. You know, God wants to dance in the space where authentic human relationships are taking place.
Yes, that's
God
it.
wants us to prepare to dance for us, so he can show his majesty, his grace. He can show it all. He can just shine, because he shines when we have authentic heart-to-heart connections. When we are feeling that with those affectations and those performances, there's no room for God. The God's like, I can't, you ain't left no room for me on the floor.
Exactly.
You done filled it up with all this other crap, right? You have cluttered the space.
Yeah.
Unclutter the space. Strip it away. You know? Yeah, man. It is. It's so funny how we run away from the very thing that would ultimately lead to what it is that we most desire at the deepest core of our being.
Amen. Exactly.
We run away from, you know.
Wow, that's so
Yeah,
spot on.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Man, Masood, I knew it was gonna be a good one. Brother, we can do this. We can pull a straight up Joe Rogan and go. We can shoot past Joe Rogan and go 4 hours.
We might have to do a part two, brother.
Right.
We'll figure it out somewhere down the road. We'll figure it out.
We will, and
Mm,
I have enjoyed this. We're coming to a close. I'm sticking
mm,
around an hour,
mm,
because I would love to have you back, and
mm.
I would love to explore more on creativity
Sure.
and the role of a thespian in life and acting,
Mm, yeah.
because we didn't touch on that one, but I think it's huge, it's
Mm,
big,
mhm.
metaphor for
Yeah.
life, and I would love to uh, dig into that with you at another time.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, this has been great. Man, there's so much more, but I'm just gonna hold my tongue here for a little bit.
Well,
But
I
you know
tell you,
what?
yes. Go ahead. Go ahead, brother.
I'll ask you before we go. I'm gonna ask you two
Yeah.
more questions. No,
Yeah.
this next one is I can't go without having you say a little bit about this because you've brought it up several times.
Yeah.
Can you just say a little bit more about creativity in the good life? Just
Mm,
I think it's so important.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, creativity. There's a few things. we have to clarify what creativity is. Creativity is often something that is framed within the context of being an artist, right? In the official sense. I'm a painter, I'm a sculptor, I'm a writer, I'm an actor, right? I'm a musician, I'm a poet. So this idea of creativity is accepted within those constructs. It's more closely aligned with that within the imagination of, particularly in the West, of the Western mindset, right? I would argue that creativity as a virtue is there to be tapped into by anybody that comes
Mm-hmm.
to it humbly, openly, beseechingly, right? To be inspired by something that for lack of a better phrase sets your soul on fire. I know incredibly creative people in a variety of different spaces. I know amazing artists who are creative, that's true. But that's low-hanging fruit. That's my business, of course. But I know scientists who are incredibly creative.
Mm-hmm.
I know business people who are incredibly creative. I know mothers who are incredibly creative, teachers, right? I know cooks, right? I think it was Dr. King that said, not everybody can give speeches on television. Not everybody can give speeches to thronging crowds. Not everybody is meant to be at the head of the march. He said, but be excellent at no matter what it is that you do. If you are a street sweeper, sweep streets so well that the host of heaven will say the day that you die, there indeed lived a great street sweeper.
Love it.
So a person can bring that creative spirit to whatever it is they do, no matter how grandiose the job or how humble. It doesn't matter. It's a quality of the heart, a quality of the spirit that we can cultivate, that we can strengthen. Creativity is a release. It's the closest that human beings can get to the work of the divine,
Mm-hmm.
because the divine is all creativity comes from the divine source.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can approach my daily life with a creative spirit, right, no matter what it is that I do, I'm stepping a little more closely in alignment with the gate of the divine, with the gate of God.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'd say about creativity, brother. Yeah.
Woo,
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
All right, folks, that's a sampler for what's next. Love it, brother. Love it. I am so with you on that. Yeah, I really love how you spoke to that. Really
Mm,
beautiful. Really, really beautiful. I
mm,
like the fire.
mm,
Yeah, yeah.
mm, mm.
So I'm gonna let that sit. And
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
and the final question before
Yeah.
we sign off here is what are your final words? Any words you'd like to leave the audience with? Anything that you want to share before we sign off?
I think a question that I've been sitting with and reflecting on a lot lately is, what am I willing to risk to heal myself and to heal others? So that's a question of intentionality. What am I willing to do? Am I willing to do the work of self-construction, of restoration, of renewal, both within and also without in community? And that work happens in small ways as well as in grand ways. Doesn't matter whether it's small or it's grand, or a combination of the two. It just matters that the work is done. So, yeah.
Beautiful, man. Thank you so much for
Brother, thank you.
uh,
Thank you, man. Thank you, brother, for the
sharing.
work that you're doing, brother, for the intentionality with which you're pursuing this podcast, and I know, you and I have only known each other a brief time, but I feel like there's a connection spiritually between us. I felt that since the moment we met.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank you for being striving to be a light in the world, brother, and to providing this platform to have deep, meaningful, authentic conversations. And I just really want to uplift the work you're doing, brother. Appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you so much, man. Yes, I'm with you. You're a soul brother. And yeah, I'm looking forward to many, many more conversations with you, my brother.
Yes,
It's a
sir.
pleasure to meet you. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. Until
Thank you.
next time.
Thank you, brother. Peace.
Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope this conversation has inspired you to reflect on your own views of the good life. If you enjoyed the show and want to hear more inspiring and thought-provoking conversations, please follow, write a review, and rate us on your favorite podcast app. If you are tuning in on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support is very much appreciated.